Tracy. Thank you for joining me. I love to upcycle clothes, purses, accessories. I've been doing it for many, many years, and I sold for many, many years. Now I just share my passion with you and do DIYs, tutorials. And today we are making a scarf out of thrifted materials. I designed this to sort of go with this upcycled outfit. It's a maxi dress and a duster. I'll put the link to the dress and the duster in my description. But here's the scarf. It's got fur, leather fringe, extra long to go with the maxi dress. This is what we're working on today. And I want to tell you a quick little, I got a message recently from a lady, one of my YouTube friends, and I have another scarf tutorial. It's like a white lace. I'll put the link to that in my description. But she followed that tutorial and she made some scarves to take to a craft show. And she emailed me or messaged me under one of my videos and said they sold out within half an hour. So these are fun items to sell. They're easy and fun to make. So I'll show you how I do it. What I'm using to start the scarf is this. And what this is the bottom of a skirt that I had cut and upcycled this top with. So this top was made out of a skirt. And I cut this bottom piece off because I didn't want it so long anyway. So this is an off-the-shoulder hippie top. I have the tutorial for this and I'll put the link in my description. So this piece is 92 inches long and it ranges from 5.5 to 4 inches wide. I didn't want it perfectly one width all the way. I want this to be tattered and messy. I'm going to give you a basic idea of how I will construct this. And I am just going to rummage around my workspaces and find materials to sew rows onto. So I will sew a row of something along here. Maybe I'll stop whatever, say I'm using fur, maybe I'll stop the fur there and use something else. But everything I use, I want to extend about 9 inches past the bottom of the scarf so that we have a real fringy bottom. So basically, I am finding materials just to sew row after row, and then when this row's done, I'll go next to it, do another row, until it's done. So super easy sewing, straight sewing, but we need to find the materials, and I'll show you what I use. Okay, so I have this really cute gold shawl with fringes at the bottom. And yes, it's cute. And why am I cutting it? Well, I buy these things to cut. And if I didn't cut everything that I felt was cute, I'd never upcycle anything. I cut cute things. That's just what I do. So I am just going to cut this fringe off. And I will probably give myself about 3/4 of an inch above the fringe so that I can sew. I don't want to actually sew the fringe. I want to sew this strip above it. So I will just cut along this line right here and get that fringe all cut off and see how long it is. It might be long enough to do a whole row on the scarf. It might not. If it's not long enough, I'll stop it where it is and I'll add something else to finish off that row. So I'll get this cut. Okay, the fringe is all cut and I have plenty to extend past the scarf bottom on each end and to sew along the edge, and I'll show you how I sew it. Okay, so I'm going to pick an end and pick a side. It does not matter. You do whatever your artistic eye is telling you. Now I want this to extend past the scarf, 9 inches, 12 inches. It really doesn't matter what you do. I'm probably going to start with about 12 since I have plenty of this and I can always trim. So I am going to, so we have a raw edge here. And I have a right and a wrong side to this scarf piece. And it has sequins here. So on the back, you can see all the strings that tied the sequins on. That is going to be the side I sew on because it will be all covered with fun stuff and it will hide all those strings. Whereas on the back of the scarf, it will be solid, and you want to have the pretty side actually be the back, and the top least attractive side, the wrong side, you want to do all your sewing on. So this will extend past. I will just lay this over top of that raw edge, stick it in my machine, and I absolutely will not pin this. This is way too long. And I will just do a fairly small straight stitch. I'll use a gold thread, and I will just run it through my machine until I'm down to the end. And then I'll leave 12 inches or so at the very end for the fringes. Okay, so now this fringe is all sewn on, and I have it extending past the bottom on both sides. And now what I want to do is add some leather fringe. I want as many wild textures as I can get on this. Okay, so I use suede and leather jackets when I put fringe on purses or whatever. And I just have a basket of remnants here. And a lot of times leather and suede will have funky, musty odors. And when I sold, I couldn't sell anything that had like a weird odor. So I would have to wash it. Well, I didn't want to take my jackets and suede to a dry cleaner and spend $50 to have a jacket cleaned and then sell a scarf for $100. You know, there go my profits. So I washed mine in the washer in cold water on a regular setting, and then I dry them just on a hot setting in the dryer. I don't line dry them because they get really stiff, and they turn out just fine for fringe. If it's a coat that you want to wear, don't do that because it will shrink and you could get a water spot. But for fringe, that's just fine. It gets it nice and clean. Okay, I have 3 colors here. I have a dark brown leather and then 2 other colors of suede. And these are the colors that I used on the kimono. And now what I want to do, these have already been deconstructed. These are just scraps now. So I am going to go to each color and try to find some, I call them panels. They're just sections that don't have seams. Like, see, here's a seam. I will cut inside these seams because I want a pure panel of just suede or leather, and I don't want any seams because that will break. They'll just come apart. So I am just going to cut out some pieces. And these will be all different lengths. I probably won't trim anything because I want them to be, some will be shorter, some will be longer. So I will just continue to sort through my pile until I get about as many as I want. I'll just kind of eyeball it, but I'll show you the pile I end up with. Okay, here are the little panels that I have cut out, and I have about 12. I'll cut them all up. I may have too much. If I don't have enough, I'll just go back and cut more. And now I have a sewer's cutting mat here. It's a Dritz, D-R-I-T-Z, if it matters, but to you, but it really doesn't matter. Anything will work. And then I have a straight edge, Fiskars, and then I have a Fiskars cutting tool, rotary cutting tool. And I use titanium blades in mine, but you do not have to. You can order titanium blades for your rotary cutter on Amazon. You just have to know what size you need. But I've definitely done it without a titanium blade, and it still cuts the leather. So And these you can get almost anywhere. Walmart, you can get them on Amazon, of course, any sewing place. And a lot of times you can buy this whole kit together, a straight edge, a cutting mat, and the rotary tool all bunched together. So now I just want to cut fringe. So it looks like I left a seam on that one, so I'll have to cut that off. I'll use a light one so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'll just lay this anywhere on my cutting mat and put my straight edge down and cut that first piece off because it's always crooked and I always toss that one. And then I just am going to cut about a little over 1/4 inch fringe. It slices right through there, just like butter. So nice. I used to cut all this by hand before. You would think this is such an obvious way to cut fringe, but I did it for a couple years by hand, and it did damage to my wrist, actually. So I am going to go ahead and get all this leather cut. So I have my fringe all cut, but I've decided before I sew that on, I want to sew something along this edge to balance out these fringes over here. So I went to my stash of fringe remnants. So this is a great way to use all those little pieces that you have left over that aren't really big enough for anything. We're just going to piece a bunch of these together. Now I have a whole pile here, and for my project, I tried to stay with neutral colors, and I will just sew them on. Now, let's see, this is still the wrong side because we see those threads here on the scarf, and I want to sew my fringe on this edge. And so I will just follow the edge all the way around. I'm starting with a piece that I think would be cute hanging off the edge. So I'll start this one about here because remember, everything I sew on, I want to try to have it extend past the scarf. So I'll start on this side maybe with this one, put it in my machine about right here. It's a fairly small straight stitch. I'll use gold thread and sew down. And then I'll pick something else from my scrap pile. And let's see, maybe this little tassel trim. I'll just overlap it slightly, lay it down, sew over it, and just keep sewing all the way down until I have my whole scarf done. And some of these I'll cut a little smaller because I want it to look mismatched. I don't want like a huge 3-foot section of anything. So I'm trying to find my scissors. So like this black chunk, I'll probably cut about like that and lay it down and just continue all the way around. I have some pieces like this. Let's see, some real fringy gold fringe, little piece of a sweater or afghan or something. So actually I have some tassels too that I'll fill in. I got a lot of these left. So I'll cut maybe like little 8-inch sections and fill in now and here and there just to make sure I have enough to go all the way around. And then I think this one, kind of a crinkly, when I get to the very end over here, I want to extend a piece, and I think I want this one to be extended on this side, down past the bottom of the scarf. Okay, I'll just go to my machine and get those sewn on. Here's what it's looking like so far. All the fringes sewn on. Now we just need to fill in the middle, and we're going to add the leather fringe now. Okay, so now I want to sew my leather fringe on. And so what I'll do is take this and my pile of fringe to my sewing machine, and I will set the pile of fringe to the right of my sewing machine, and I'll just grab pieces and alternate colors. I will start, I have some fringe that are a little longer than the other pieces, so I set those aside. because we want to extend past the bottom of the scarf. I'll use my longer fringes first on each side so that we extend past the scarf. But what I'll do is go to my sewing machine, and I am sewing on, here are the fringes we just sewed on, the black, the brown, all the different fringes. I will start down at the bottom towards that fringe. Now I have my longer pieces I'm starting with, and I will sew the first one right at the edge because I want that to be long. And I will be sewing about an inch above that trim line that we just sewed, all that trim, about an inch above it. And then I will have my fringe all facing out like this. I'm not going to go in because I'm still sort of on the edge here. So I will just put this in my machine, lay a piece of fringe down, sew over it, get my other piece of fringe that's fairly long, go about an inch from that one, sew over it. Now I'm just still working with my longer pieces. I'll be still going an inch above that trim line and an inch down from that piece of fringe. And I will just keep going with a straight stitch all the way down. And I will not mark this with chalk or anything. I'm just going to eyeball it because it absolutely does not have to be perfect, just approximate. So I'll do that until I'm all the way down to this end, and I'll take my other long pieces and stitch those down at that end so they extend past the scarf. Okay, I'm just adding one piece at a time, sewing over top, add another piece. And you do not need a special machine to sew jacket, leather, and fringe because it's so thin. As long as you have a good jeans or denim needle, any machine should work. You just, when you get into like the upholstery leathers, things like that, they get a lot thicker. And then you would probably need a more industrial type machine. But I've always just used standard home sewing machines to sew these little pieces. Okay, now I have all the leather sewn on. I threw it over the dress that I upcycled. How awesome is that? Okay, so now I want to do one more row. This is what it's looking like. And so I still have a gap there. I want to see a little bit of this base fabric coming through because I'm really loving the colors. So I'm going to do fur. I have a ton of faux fur remnants and maybe even real fur. I have to pull out my stash and see what I have, and I'll show you what I do. Okay, so here is my stash of fur. I have kind of this animal print faux fur. I love that. I have a real piece of fur. I know that's controversial and I don't seek it out, but I don't know, it's so beautiful. So I'll probably use some of that. Maybe a little gray. There's gray in the duster, a teeny bit in the purple patch on the dress, so I might use a little of that. Now, here's it's actually rabbit fur. And quick story, I found this quilt one day at a flea market, and it was so cheap because it was tattered, but it was sold, and it was a velvet embroidered crazy quilt, and the whole entire back, I know, poor little rabbits, but the whole entire backside was rabbit fur. So I bought it, and that was years and years ago, and that's what I have left. Anyway, so I'll sort through here, and I'll find the pieces that I want to use, and I'll show you how I will cut them. Okay, I'm going to show you on a piece of paper because it will be easier for you to see rather than watch me cut, because that's so dark and furry and everything. So I will be cutting out pieces like this. And I will just randomly cut, and I cut these pretty fast. Each end will have a point, but it'll be about an inch wide, give or take, because none of this has to be perfect, and it's better if it's not. And they will probably range in about this size. I would say that's about 9 inches. Some may be 12 inches. Some may be more curved, like this. Some may be straighter, but I basically want a point at each end and wider in the middle. If I cut these in rectangles, it wouldn't give us a natural appearance. And I want this to have sort of a natural appearance. And these will range in size, give or take a few inches. Okay, so I'm just going to start cutting and have a vacuum cleaner close by because this is messy. Very messy. Now see all the stuff that's going to come off of it now? I'll show you what I do before I sew it on. I'll get all these cut before I do this with a vacuum cleaner, but I'll show you what I do. Okay, so I'll be using my vacuum cleaner to clean my table, the carpet, everything, but these pieces I always clean up before I sew. And I'm just going to turn my vacuum cleaner on and pull this nozzle up, and I am going to hold on to the end very, very tight because it could easily get sucked in. I've done that, so that's how I know. That cleans up your fur so that when, oh, I got some on me too. I'll use a lint roller for that. Okay, I'll continue cutting and show you the stack I end with and how I sew it on. Okay, I got all my fur pieces cut. Everything's cleaned up and ready to go. Some people tell me, you make it look so easy. Well, I can stop the camera and do all the dirty work and come back all fresh and clean, So a good source for fur is, of course, just like jackets and coats and vests and things like that at the thrift store. So I'll show you how I get these sewn on. Okay, so here's my scarf again. And as you can see, there's still sort of one section here that I can sew stuff onto. And I will start down at the bottom and I will pick a piece because everything I sew on here, I want to extend past the scarf for fringes. So I'll just pick a piece that I like that's kind of straight and long, and I'll start with that and lay it down. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it, going down the center between this fringe and the leather fringe we sewed on. And I will just overlap it as I go. So all the way down. Now, fur has a nap, so I could put it on so that I'm sewing with this nap going down like this, or I could sew against the grain, and if I do that, then it sticks up a little more and has a little more dimension. So guess what I'm going to do? Going against the grain, just so that it has more dimension and it sticks up and is more noticeable. So I'm going to go get these all sewn on. Okay, here's the scarf all styled. And you don't have to wear something like this. This would be really cute with a pair of jeans and like a tunic and some cool boots. All right. Thank you so much for watching.